All right, hello there, everybody. So this is the Comlink Chatter podcast, and I'm here with Ben Quadraneros right here. And
Almost, not quite.
And so, how are you, Ben?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. So there was something that I wanted to kind of, I guess, add to the show. So whenever we start an episode, I'd like to talk about kind of what we're reading. In relation to Star Wars, or is there anything that we thought was cool or discovered about Star Wars? What do you got?
I'm not reading anything right now. Like I said last episode, I'm not the biggest reader, but I am watching The Bad Batch.
Okay.
It's good.
Okay.
It's surprisingly good. Like, I went into it thinking, because the first season was okay, but I went into it thinking that it was just going to be mediocre. Like, it's actually really good.
Okay.
So
was the first season good? I watched a few episodes.
First season was mediocre. It picked up some towards the end, but this new season's really good.
Okay. All right. I'll have to... My kind of thing with the Disney canon is I kind of want to finish all of the expanded universe stuff, and then I'll probably start dabbing into that.
When I'm watching stuff or reading stuff, I don't really think about canon. I mean, obviously, I think of where it fits in those timelines and stuff, but it's not like I'm thinking, oh, if they mess up something, I'm going to point it out and be like, oh, this unwatchable. I'm not like that.
I got you. So what is canon?
It's whatever you want it to be.
Okay.
Honestly, I mean, you can make your own canon. It's called head canon. You can follow the Disney canon. You can follow Legends. You can follow George Lucas's canon. You can follow Timothy Zahn's canon. You can follow Dave Filoni's canon. And it's just whatever.
Okay. All right.
So what do you think canon is?
What do I think canon is? Well, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit. I haven't mentioned what I'm reading right now. But,
yes.
I'm just getting ahead of myself. But so I'm reading the. I just finished a storyline in the Star Wars Legacy comics, and that is about Luke Skywalker's great-grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting because the whole dynamic of the Sith have returned, and Skywalker's somehow the Sith have returned again.
To quote the newer Star Wars movies.
Yes, somehow they've returned. But they, of course, explain it a lot better than they do in...
Cloning tanks.
Yes. It's a nice build-up. Mm-hmm. And eventually, as we read some comics, we can build up to there. But I was reading that. Then I also went back to... I think it came out in the 80s. But I know it first started in 77. But I'm reading Marvel Star Wars Annual number 1. And I'm a little bit into that. And I've been I've been reading the Star Wars Marvel original comics because I'm starting to come to the end of my comic reading. And I've actually got a stack of Canon books back there that... Eventually, I'll read because
those Vader comics are really good.
Are they?
Yes, I've read a few.
I know that some of them can fit in with the expanded universe, but of course, I want to finish the expanded universe before I go into that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so canon. What do I think canon is? Well,
what do you think canon is?
Let's look at the definition of it or where it originated from. The word canon. So the term canon was from the Hebrew Greek word meaning cane or measuring rod.
So you heard it here first, guys. Canon is just a measuring rod. Don't pay attention to it.
Well, here's the thing. The canon, the word, the measuring rod, was used within, the Christians used it to describe, to explain what the real Bible was, because there were works of, additional books, and then there was this is the Bible.
Yes.
This is the biblical canon of how things are. And so, first time I heard this word, I think it was whenever the expanded universe got decanonized. And so a lot of people threw around different things about it. And they were like, well, George Lucas said this. This writer said this. Well, in this podcast, I know a lot of people have explained, okay, what's the deal with it? Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to, I guess just cover some bases, some quotes. I'm not sure how much you know about what canon is or what people's view on canon are, but that's where it came from. But before we get into that, did you want to plug any podcasts?
Yes. Okay. So, Brady, do you like comedy?
Yes.
Do you like absolutely random off-the-wall topics?
Yes.
Do you like interviews?
I do like interviews.
Well, then may I suggest to you the podcast Timmy Time with Ben.
Timmy Time with Ben.
Great podcast on Spotify now. 2 episodes are out.
So I know you're Ben. Who is Timmy?
Timmy, a friend of mine. I've known him for years. Great guy. Hilarious. It's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what? It's just completely random topics?
It's like literally, I told you earlier, last episode we talked about ham boning, making music with the body.
Okay.
Slapping yourself. It's great.
Okay.
And then we just talk about the randomest stuff.
All right.
It's awesome.
I'll have to definitely check that out. Now, where can we find that?
On Spotify.
On Spotify.
Yeah.
All right. So it's just called Timmy Time with Ben?
Timmy Time, and then in parentheses, with Ben.
With Ben. Okay. So you're just kind of a guest host? No, I'm just...
I am the host.
You're the host.
I'm the interviewer. He's the interviewee.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah.
All right.
All right.
And so we also have, I also have a YouTube channel that I'm working on building up, and it's called Fine Editions. It's got General Grievous as the...
Yeah.
It's got the... Yes. And so the goal for that is to record my collecting and just building building with Lego, collecting books, comics, figures, whatever I decide to collect. I can just have a record of that, and then also be able to share it and review it for the viewers. Recently, I got I'm not sure how many. It was a hardback of the Star Wars Empire Epic Collection. So it collected, I think it was the first 3 of the already recollecting of the, like, basically they're stories that take place right after Revenge of the Sith. So you had the, as we described in last episode, the Star Wars Endgame being Revenge of the Sith. This is the aftermath of that. And it follows characters like Darth Vader, some other Jedi, and I was able to get it on a sale. Nice. It's usually about 100, 125. I got it for 50. Dang. I was like, nice. All right. And so, yeah, I just recently posted some pictures on the Instagram. So we've got it on Instagram and YouTube. We don't have TikTok or Facebook yet, but I might be working on that. I'm not sure.
Please don't. Don't do TikTok.
What?
Fine with Facebook. TikTok's just weird.
So back to our main topic. So where were we? So people would say, or people would ask, who makes Star Wars canon? Okay, is it the person that created it? Is it the person that holds the rights now? What do you think?
Like I said earlier, I think it's the people make the Star Wars canon. The readers make it. I mean, because obviously, it's a piece of fiction.
Right.
So you get to decide what you want to watch. Mm-hmm. It's not the end of the world if you don't like this one thing. Mm-hmm. You can make your own headcanon.
Yeah.
I will say, though, I feel like Disney does try to make a constant try. I'm not saying they do it well.
They do try.
They do try to do...
Well, there's no try.
Yeah, exactly. Take their own advice. They do try to make it one continuity thing, but and that's probably going to be easier to understand if you do that. But I mean, again, you can make your own headcanon if you want.
Right.
You could completely just disregard the sequels, but still like Rebels and still like have that part of your headcanon.
Right. So one of the things I've got here is sorry. So to George Lucas, if he makes the canon, because he's the one that created it all, mm-hmm. he considers canon. The only thing that is canon are the 6 films, mm-hmm. And he considers that his story. as canon. It says that to everybody. Like what that is his story. The story of Star Wars is Anakin to Vader, then Anakin again. That's what it is. Everything else is added on to it. Now, of course, he does get very involved with certain projects, which we'll get into later. But the one of the people on the story group, which Star Wars has a story group that decides what is canon and what is not. And so one of the people on that, probably the most vocal story group member as of recently, his quote sounds a lot like what you're saying. It's all fake. Anyway, so you can choose to accept whatever you want as part of the story. That's his quote. And so then he said, if you choose to only accept the real official canon, cool. If you like to mix and match between continuities, cool. If you like to make up your own stories, also cool. So he uses the term continuity. Okay. So what is the difference between canon and the continuity?
I feel like canon is what you believe actually happened.
Okay.
In the fictional world, so it's kind of weird to say, like what actually happened in the fictional world. I feel like continuity is the ability for things to fit into place. Like to just like hold over, like have one overarching story over it, and just to be able to understand it. Yeah, that's what I feel like.
Okay, is. All right. So there was this guy. He works for Lucasfilm. He's also a member of the story group, and he said this back in 2005. So before Disney bought it, he said there is only one overall continuity, and so this was referring to George Lucas's canon in quotation marks, and then the books and comics canon. And so kind of how they worked that together is that they worked to keep both things consistent. So George Lucas worked on the prequels, okay? He worked with a Star Wars encyclopedia because he was like, well, I like this, so I'm going to see if it's here. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, that's already been used, so I'm not going to use that name. And then sometimes he would, if he needs a Jedi, he'll go to that, find a Jedi, use it. Or if I believe that Timothy Zahn said that he reads some of the books and quite a few of the comics because he's more of a visual guy. And so he really liked Aayla Secura because that was not his creation. It was from the comic books. And so he really liked her. And so he was like, all right, I'll go put you in my movie. And so now she's in both continuities.
Yeah.
And so, sorry.
Very good.
So before Disney came along and kind of went and stirred the pot, there were different hierarchies of canon. So there was the George Lucas canon, 6 movies, as he describes my story. Then there was the T canon, so the TV canon, which is mainly just the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And so for some reason, a lot of people say that George considered the Clone Wars as canon as his stuff, but then it's like on official stuff, why didn't they just why didn't they make T canon, G canon? Like, why didn't they just make it the same?
I feel like that's kind of what they're doing now with the Bad Batch.
Oh, yes.
Because
they see it at the same level.
No, they don't, actually.
They don't?
Because they literally, someone who worked on the Bad Batch said, yeah, they're not held down by canon restrictions. They said they can make whatever they want.
Oh, that's interesting.
So if they wanted to, they could have Plo Koon in the show. Even though he technically died in Revenge of the Sith, or supposedly died.
Right.
But I feel like the reason they want to do that is because, again, maybe the show wants to go a different direction.
Right.
Maybe they want, or maybe at some point they want to just completely throw away the show, like everything away from the show, just completely. It's just depends on what they want to do or how they see the future working out.
I can see this a lot like I can see it going 2 ways. One way, it's going to go a lot like Star Trek. I don't know if you're familiar with their whole expanded universe or stuff. But it's very... They work to make it consistent, but it's very... You make your own. It sounds a lot like how we're talking about Star Wars now, where before Star Wars was, as one of the story group guys said, it was one continuity, and with Star Trek, it was very much different things. Which, of course, they have. They use a lot more time travel, I guess.
Yeah.
And so
Star Wars could do the time travel thing too. I mean,
they can.
They got the world between worlds.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Which I think we'll eventually talk about that, how that could tie in a lot of the canon stuff, and how there's two separate universes. Okay, so then there's the C canon, so the continuity canon. Books, comics, etc. And that's considered the expanded universe and legends. So the original, it would be considered like the original continuity. And so there was this interview in Star Wars Insider that said after Star Wars was released, it became apparent that my story, however many films it took to tell, was only one of thousands that could be told about the characters who inhabit its galaxy. But these are not the stories that I've decided to tell. Instead, it's gifted to writers and different people to make that. And this was with an interview with George Lucas. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the C canon is. It's kind of the first continuity. Now, of course, we have the Disney continuity, but. Yeah. So George Lucas considered them as different worlds. He said that in an interview. But then after that, he said that he likes to keep them consistent.
Yeah.
What do you think of all that?
Like the keeping them consistent?
Yeah.
I think they should, because there's obviously fandoms for both. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like if you let one drop, the other one's going to drop too, because you've got fans who are fans of one side and fans who are fans of the other side. Mm-hmm. But then you've got fans who are fans of both.
Right.
And if you fail to keep one up, then the other one's going to lose fandom, because they're just going to do the same thing to the other one. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I feel like they should keep them up, and keep them up to speed.
Right. So some of George Lucas's works he actually worked on was, and I kind of looked into these. Some of these he was really involved with. Some of them he wasn't as much. He maybe gave some notes and things there, but he worked on the Force Unleashed game. Mm-hmm. Did you play that?
I played some.
Okay,
not all of it.
All right. Then the Dark Empire. He came up with Palpatine returning.
Yeah.
The first time. So in the comic books, he returned, and what they wanted to do was they wanted to have Darth Vader come back, except it wasn't Anakin. It was a different guy pretending to be him. And George was like, no, don't do that. Just bring back the Emperor somehow. Somehow he returned. But, of course, they explained it a lot better than...
They actually did their job.
He also worked on the Ewok movies. There was...
The critically acclaimed Ewok.
Yes, the wonderful ones, which I'm actually working... Well, after I finish working on Lego Tatooine, I'm going to build a Lego indoor.
Yeah, good luck with that.
It's going to be a lot of tree pieces.
Yeah.
And
you want to get your hands in that Lego Ewok Village set somehow.
Yes. And so what I'd like to introduce is some of the main story points of those movies. And so I think there was an autobiography by... one of the cast members in one of those movies, and he said that George Lucas filmed the reshoots for those movies. And I'd almost consider those more canon than some of the new stuff, because George Lucas was involved with it. And you're like, what?
If you want to go down that path, George Lucas was a little involved in the sequels, just not a lot.
Was he?
Yeah, they consulted on very few things. So
yeah. But, he straight up filmed the reshoots for that. And then later, so after Return of the Jedi, there were a bunch of books. And so he gave the rules for them to follow, because eventually he wanted to make 7, 8, and 9, and then he didn't want to do them, and then he said he wanted to do them again. It was very back and forth. And he gave them rules. Okay, because this is kind of a spoiler about who lives. So he said, because they wanted to kill Luke Skywalker. They did. They wanted it to be impactful. They wanted to set off the new era of Star Wars in the books, to have him die and then the next generation take over. Well, George was like, no.
Absolutely
Do not kill him because...
Luke lives forever.
Do not kill him because I have plans for him. Mm-hmm. So you can kill anybody except for Luke Skywalker, C-3PO, and R2-D2. Everyone else
is on the board.
Yeah.
Not the frog in Return of the Jedi. They killed off the frog in Return
They killed off the frog in Return of the Jedi.
I almost said Last Jedi. I'm like, wait a minute.
Wait, was there a frog problem?
No.
There was that camel thing.
The whole movie was a frog.
Okay, so he gave rules to follow for this, the continuity canon. So after this, we got the secondary canon, and that's video games. I think I'm looking off into my...
I thought you were looking at something. You were going to point at something.
The Marvel comics were a part of the secondary canon, and so what they later did was that they started using those plot points and basically made continuations of them. So that kind of boosted them up to the main continuity.
I feel like that's what they should do now.
Yeah.
Take even if they're the canon comics, or the Disney canon comics.
Yeah.
Just expand on those. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited for the new. What do you think about the new Jedi Fallen Order games?
I think they're beautiful games. I prefer the Jedi Knight games.
Are you gonna play the new one when it comes out?
Maybe, but I won't play it right away.
Yeah, I probably won't. I mean, it depends on whether I have money at the time too or not.
Yeah. Then we've also got the non-canon, which are for fun stories and different things that they're like, no, that's not canon. Definitely not. Then we got the Detours canon. The D
oh my gosh!
That is on the list.
You just unlocked a part of my brain that had been shut off for months.
Like join the dark side. It's cool.
It's cool, yo.
And so,
dude, did you see the entire episode that got leaked?
I did not. I only seen clips.
They leaked. Okay, it might be off now, but I watched it when it got leaked. It was an entire episode. I forgot what happened, but it involved Lando Calrissian.
Okay.
And that's all.
Maybe I've seen.
That's all I remember from it. And I remember thinking that this is the weirdest thing ever. I wish they would bring this back because it was funny.
So it was made by Seth Green, who's kind of like a comedian, and so he was going to make this show that was completely not canon, and they were like, no.
Well, here's no. It got greenlighted by Lucasfilm.
It did,
and then Disney came in.
I think it might have gotten canceled before that.
Was it?
I think George canceled it because he didn't like how Darth Vader was portrayed. Because he was like, it ruins his menacing.
Well, that's what they did with Lego Star Wars.
It did.
I'm like, come on, man. That would have been so funny to see Darth Vader. So, yo, the dark side is cool.
That meme's been everywhere.
It's hilarious.
So then we've got the Disney canon, and that they made everything after April 14th, with the exception of Star Wars Visions, which is the anime, and then Marvel 108. And then there's a few other things that are still a part of the original continuity. But all of those, and then after that is a part of the Disney canon, along with the 6 movies, the Clone Wars, the Dave Filoni Clone Wars, and then... that was all consistent, and then they started making books about the Clone Wars, and then Dave Filoni started contradicting them, just like he did with the old continuity.
I hate that because it was so weird. Because he helped them write the books, I think.
Yes, he did give show notes and stuff.
Like, he gave them notes and said, hey, this is what we're going with it, this is the canon of the show, and then he went back and reverted that canon. He double-crossed himself, and it was weird.
The Dave Filoni Tales of the Jedi, there was an episode about Ahsoka fighting an Inquisitor on a farm or whatever. That was in the Ahsoka book. That is Disney canon, and it was a contradiction. Just like her having she had blue lightsabers instead of green lightsabers.
Yeah.
Kanan Jarrus from Star Wars Rebels.
The way he
had a comic
got
book
separated
series
from his master. Yeah.
Yes, very different.
They're completely different.
Yes,
and it's weird because you got two different stories. And you don't know which one is right, but you feel like people should be are gonna go for the show one because it's more publicized. It was a show,
right? And we're kind of getting into a time where it's like, okay, the only thing that's canon is what you see visually, with the exception of Star Wars Visions, I feel like what they're going to do eventually is they're going to have a reboot. And they're going to reboot the books and comics again and just keep the visual stuff. Mm-hmm. Or they're going to say that stuff doesn't matter, which they've kind of hinted to, because I think there was some dialogue different in the sequel movies and in the sequel movie novelizations.
Well, I feel like dialogue, as long as it doesn't completely change the story.
Right.
If it's a minor thing, if someone says the coat was blue and someone else says the coat was... green. I don't think that's a big deal.
Yeah, which people have asked Lucasfilm, okay, what's canon? What's the main canon? And they were like, well, we're gonna take precedents of we're gonna put forward
shows
the visual media, which it makes sense
because that's their main source of income.
Right.
You're not gonna get a lot of money from someone writing a book.
Right. Well, they will get a lot of money, but not just as much. And then after that, we've got the Visions canon. Did you like Visions?
I love Visions. I didn't. There was maybe one episode. I think I didn't watch the Tatooine rock concert one because I thought that concept was really weird. So I'm not going to watch that. But every other one I watched, I think.
So I have a theory about that. So
you should do that last panel on your that mock. You're telling me about you need one spot for a panel to do the.
Oh, yes.
Rock concert.
So I'm building a Lego Tatooine, and I've got a lot of base plates, and I have a open spot, and we were trying to figure out before the show what we were going to put there. We were thinking we could do Tatooine Rhapsody.
Do it.
That's what the episode's
called.
Do it.
Do Tatooine Rhapsody.
So my theory with that is that what happened to Rhoda the Hutt? I think that the Hutt from that episode, I don't know if you've watch the episode, there's a Hutt that is trying to get away from Jabba because he wants to be a rock star.
No.
That's Rhoda the Hutt.
No.
It's canon. It's my canon. You can't change that.
No. I just realized what you're... No.
Rhoda grew up because it explains where he's...
From the Clone Wars movie, he became a rock star, guys.
So Jabba has a son, and we never see him again after the Clone Wars.
After the Clone Wars movie, I think. It's not even it's literally...
He appears in one episode of the Clone Wars when they go back and visit him. He's just cuddling with Jabba. But then, there are comic books about Jabba, never mentions him, which, people can think, well, if he died, of course he wouldn't want to mention him.
Rhoda's in his angsty teen phase. It explains
so
much.
I don't know. I don't know how fast Hutt's age, but he's about could be 15 to 20, in that age. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, that actually kind of makes sense though. Why does that shouldn't be?
It kind of does. So here, this is where it comes to the fan canon. Okay, George Lucas considers there's 3 pillars. There's his Star Wars, which we've talked about. Yeah. There's Lucasfilm's Star Wars. He describes it as the president of publishing, I think. He says, okay, so there's his canon or whatever, and then there is the fan canon, and so the
collective head canon.
Yes, and so there's
if you don't know what head canon is, it's your own canon.
Yeah,
you pick
it's your own. You like,
listening.
I like this, but not that. Yeah. Put it together.
Oh, I like this book, but I really, really hate that book, and I want this one to be true, but I don't want that one to be true. But they're technically part of the same storyline. I just want this one. So
the author of the original Star Wars book, and then its sequel, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, he saw episode 9 and was like, I can do better than that, and he wrote a book.
And what is this book called?
Well, his name's Alan Dean Foster.
Oh yeah, I have heard that name. I'm gonna look him up real quick.
So I think he wrote a book or he wrote an outline or something, and he was like, "This is how I would tell it." There's just one thing that I know about it, and that is that he writes it where Rey, the main character, is a robot. That's why she's able to pick up on Force abilities so well. She's like a cyborg. Because in one of the books, she downloads the powers from Kylo Ren through the Force, dyad, whatever.
Yeah, here it is. Star Wars novelist Alan Dean Foster wrote Episode 9 treatment retcon in The Last Jedi. Huh. Using the final chapter in the trilogy to retcon the middle chapter. I'm going through here and it's just a bunch of people complaining about it. It's funny.
But, yeah. Now, there is this website. It's called Star Wars Expanded Universe Timeline. And he takes, he has the main template, which is the Expanded Universe, the C canon. And then he takes some of the Disney canon and whatever fits in there, he'll try to piece that together, which are some of those books over there. I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm thinking about putting it into my collection because it'll save me shelf space. And
if you line it up right, it'll work.
Yeah. And so that's my plan there.
Got a question.
Yes.
So, you know that the final showing of Episode 9 wasn't the original script.
Yes.
Have you heard a few things about the original script?
I have.
What do you think about the original script? Like with the double bladed and like the whole Vader's castle thing.
I don't have a whole lot of interest with it because I consider the continuity canon, the Legends Expanded Universe, I consider that as the official continuation because it was. George Lucas had his hand in it. He says it's separate worlds, but his actions said different.
Well, I'm kind of asking, like, what do you think? Would you think of that? Would that have been better? Like, in movies term, would that have been a better movie than what we got?
I think it would have brought back a lot of fans.
Yeah, because it would have been something completely different.
It was going to be called Duel of the Fates,
which kind of name goes hard.
It does.
It does, especially if it had the song "Duel of the Fates" in it.
Right, which the trailers had Duel of the Fates in it.
That was so infuriating because I went into that expecting that like whole duel in the Death Star thing.
Mm-hmm.
I went into that expecting like, oh, it's gonna be kind of like Obi-Wan and Anakin, but like in water-based environment. That's gonna be freaking awesome if they play Duel of the Fates over it.
Yeah,
it turned out to be like probably the worst lightsaber fight I've ever seen. Like the only thing that was worse than that was the Praetorian Guards thing in Last Jedi.
Yes. My expectations were not high. I enjoyed it as a fan fiction ripoff of Dark Empire
because I remember the only part I didn't have high expectations for. The only thing I had like high expectations for was that lightsaber duel because I had been talking to friends about it for like for a week before that. I had been talking to a couple friends who were like, yeah, this is the potential to be the coolest lightsaber fight since Obi-Wan and Anakin. Okay. Like this, it has so like the potential's there, the setting's there, the stakes hopefully are there, and they just threw it out the window.
Yeah, no, it was
the whole like force healing thing. That's kind of stupid.
Well, it was in the expanded universe, but it just came too easy for her.
It did came too easy. Like I thought it was. I think they did it good with a like in the Mandalorian. Grogu was the only
which
one.
They introduced it. That came out Friday. Or
like the week before that.
The week before, yeah.
And I think they expected everyone to just know that's there. And like, wait a minute, that isn't... So, like, it would have been cool if it was just Grogu's thing. Like, that's his cool thing. Like, that's his unique power. You know, like how some Jedis have, like, that thing where they can touch things and, like, they can see the passive. That's cool. That's his power. Mm-hmm. But they just gave it to him.
I feel like with the difference between Grogu and Rey is that, which this has been talked to death, but... he's a 50-year-old
baby who had
creature.
Yeah, like, who had actually some training.
Yes, he was trained by Yoda.
Yeah, it might not have been a lot of training, but he still had more than Rey.
Right. And I'm surprised that he wasn't in the Obi-Wan show. Because they had the whole episode 3, scene in there.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, here we're going to see Grogu. But then he wasn't in there, so they surprised me with that. But anyway, yeah, it was. there was that. Next week, or next time we do the podcast, I do have. Do you have time to read some comics to talk about next week?
Let me think. I probably do, as long as I don't get a bunch of work to do.
No, you're
good. As long as I'm not bombarded with a bunch of assignments, I should be good.
I gotcha. So we will be going over. Well, what I'd like to do is go through the Republic comic books, along with a few other ones that kind of tie into that. Basically, I'm wanting to build up to as we described, Star Wars Endgame, and that is Revenge of the Sith. Yeah. And so there's a few comics. Well, there's a lot of comics. And so as we go through that, we can basically build up to that. If we get uninterested, we can switch off. I've got a few episode ideas for like centering on certain multimedia projects like the Clone Wars or either of the Clone Wars, different things like that. But is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
I think we covered most of it.
All right. This is going to be a shorter podcast today. We've got some things going on today, but hope to be able to do this again.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So make sure to check out your podcast.
Timmy Time with Ben.
Timmy Time with Ben.
Disclaimer, the first episode, not the best. We're still trying to during that, when we recorded that, we were still trying to figure out how to podcast. So
yeah. And then also check out my YouTube channel and Instagram, Fine Editions. Thank you so much for listening.
Yep.
Bye.